So let's get started with the meeting. Again, once again, my name is Tito Corona, Metro Community Relations Manager. You're here for the Eastside Transit Corridor Phase 2 project update meeting. We were last here virtually in November, and this is our next stop before we start the environmental process a little bit down the line this year. We wanted to provide another update specifically tonight to discuss Commerce and Montebello. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll go over a few housekeeping items. If you may or may not hear at the beginning of this presentation as the meeting was starting, this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the project webpage a little bit down the line, so you can review it as well should you have missed some information. For everyone that is in attendance of this webinar, webcams are off during the entire presentation, as will microphones. Microphones will be activated once we start the Q&A feature and we call on you to ask a question. And during the presentation, we will be going through quite a bit of information, but we will make sure to get to the Q&A. Once we start the questions and comment period, that's when we'll ask you to raise hands to get in line to ask your questions. You'll also be able, let's talk about how you're going to ask your questions if you want to raise your hand. At the bottom of your screen, there is a function that says raise hand. You select that, you touch that button that says raise hand, and a hand will appear on the upper corner of the screen, just like it's doing so for me. We will call on you and it'll populate the order of folks who have raised their hands for us to go in those orders. So once we are done, we'll drop your hand so we can continue on to the next person. You will also have an opportunity to type your questions in the Q&A. If you do not feel comfortable speaking to us or speaking with us, you can do so by using the Q&A feature, which is also at the bottom of the screen next to the raise hand button, just to the right of it that says Q&A. All you have to do is ask a question and submit it, and then we have staff that can answer the question for you working with us tonight. Again, the Q&A feature will be enabled as well, so we can ask questions in writing. Again, we ask that you wait until we're done with the presentation, because in many cases your questions are answered during the presentation if you ask the questions early. That's happened a few times, so we want to make sure that you do understand that we will be getting to your questions. Another item that I had mentioned earlier is the interpretation. You can hear me right now in English, which is great, but if we do have a question that is asked in Spanish, translation will turn on for those of you that are listening in the English channel. So if you are not listening in the English channel, I ask you now to select at the bottom of your page, select the translation key and press that, and then select English. If it is on the off button, you will still hear me, but once the question is asked in Spanish, the translation will not appear unless you are in the English channel. Now I'm going to make the announcement in Spanish if we have some folks who are still listening to me in English. So please hold for 1 second. Hola, si me están escuchando en español, a mí, y escucharon la presentación que comenzamos ahorita en inglés, tienen la oportunidad, si gustarían, escuchar esta presentación en español, seleccionando el botón que dice Translation y escoger donde dice Spanish. Cuando selecciona ese botón van a comenzar de oír la presentación completamente en español. Si tienen preguntas en español, favor de levantar la mano cuando comenzamos con las presentaciones y van a poder hacer su pregunta en español y vamos a hacer traducción para ustedes. Muchas gracias. Vamos a comenzar con esta reunión y continuamos con la próxima slide. Now let me start saying that in English. I was continuing on with this presentation in Spanish. But let's go to the next slide. We do have an icebreaker for you. So what we're going to do is populate a poll, and we want to know, how did you hear about this community meeting? We're always interested to hear how folks are joining us, and we're always looking for opportunities to expand our network to get as many people involved as possible. So you have the options of mail notice, email, social media, Facebook, flyer, street banner, friend, coworker, community organization, or other. So what I'm going to ask now is for the icebreaker. Here we go. The poll is up. So if you can please start, select one of your choices so we can see how you found out about this meeting. It'll be a great tool for us to find out how you heard about this tonight. Looks like we've had our responses now, and the majority of you that that are here, or a majority that responded here, showing that email, although that's 23%, it's pretty spread out across the board. Email, mail notice, social media, Facebook, and flyer, with the exception of street banners. I think that's the only one that didn't get noticed. But thank you all for participating. This is a great tool that helps us understand how our folks are joining us and how we can continue to coordinate with you. So we're going to close the poll and go on to the next slide. And as we do that, I wanted to discuss the agenda. Tonight we'll be talking about the proposed project overview and update. We provided that in November, but there's more updates for you. We are also going to have a new section compared to last meetings that we had in November, where we will have our real estate department talk about the property acquisition and relocation process for impacted properties along the alignment. And then we will also delve quickly into the construction and mitigations programs that come once we start into construction. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be shared tonight, and you may think that it's happening around the corner, like immediately, but there will also show the timeline so you can see roughly when this will be happening. But we do want to make sure that you understand what the processes are for this project as we move forward. We're also, following the construction, we'll go into the proposed project design overview. And again, these will be focused on Commerce and Montebello. And then once we are done, we'll come back and start the Q&A process and take your questions and comments there. Again, so we'll have 45 minutes of presentation and 45 minutes of Q&A, and we'll go from there. Just want to share with everybody, we do have expectations of our neighbors, that we want to conduct a respectful meeting to allow ideas and comments to be shared in an open and fair environment. Again, we ask you to address us in your questions and comments, and everyone has an opinion, and we do ask that you respect your neighbor's opinion. Again, we're all able to have this peaceful dialogue and be able to share ideas. As I stated earlier, we did have the opportunity as well to ask these questions in Spanish. We have staff that is bilingual Spanish speaking. Our project manager, Jenny Cristales Ceballos, is bilingual Spanish English as well as people who are presenting tonight. Constantine Akram, who is real estate, he's also bilingual in Spanish. Melissa de la Peña is also bilingual in Spanish. Everybody who is presenting tonight pretty much has the ability to also respond in Spanish should we have any additional questions or comments. So again, I did want to acknowledge that. And we also have folks on site that are also able to address your questions in person. I wanted to acknowledge the folks that we have. And one more time, I think we are over at the Commerce City Hall parking lot. So for those of you in Commerce, again, you are listening or watching through our mobile tech van, which is pretty much a setup that we're broadcasting this presentation in person, so you can participate in person should you like to do so. Staff there is bilingual. I think we have Edgar Gutierrez there, and I think also Edna Jimenez, who are on site that can help with any questions in Spanish. So like I said, we have a lot of information to get to. So let's get started. Go on to the next slide and introduce Jenny Cristales Ceballos, who will be going over this portion of the presentation. Jenny?
So Tito, before we actually move on to the slides, I think we want to acknowledge some folks that are in the audience from our elected offices and elected officials. So currently we have Kimberly Ann Cobos Cawthorn. She's the mayor of City of Montebello. And then also we have Viviana Gomez from Supervisor Han's office. So just want to take the time to acknowledge them and appreciate that they are here at the meeting. So now we'll just jump right into the project overview and history, and just want to share this with the community, because this project has been studied for quite some time. And again, also want to talk about, you know, where we've been and where we're currently at, and we'll talk about the project timeline. So, you know, with any project at Metro, we start off with an alternative analysis. And again, this is something that we look at in terms of, the 47 alternatives and routes, modes, and different configurations for the project. Basically, how do we extend it and where and how and what type of mode, whether BRT, bus, light rail, heavy rail. And so out of that analysis, we studied 2 alternatives in the draft environmental document in 2014. So we looked at what are the environmental impacts, construction impacts for these 2 alternatives. At that point in time, the board did not select an LPA, meaning they did not select a project to move forward. So at that, they wanted to continue studying the alternatives. With that, we moved into a study in 2017, and that was to address comments and concerns that we heard from some of our partner agencies and also some of the community members. And in particular, what came out of the 2017 study is a new connection north-south from Atlantic Pomona down to a connection down in Washington. So this is when the tunnel was introduced as part of the project, right? Connecting Atlantic fully underground all the way to the city of Commerce, a little bit past Citadel. And so we started a environmental process. We reinitiated the environmental process, studying 3 alternatives, which was the SR60, the combined alternative, and the Washington alternative. And the combined alternative looked at building both alternatives. And again, these were light rail alternatives. In 2020, exactly almost 2 years ago, after doing some additional environmental analysis, looking at the engineering, and also the adopted Metro Board policies, we withdrew the SR16, the combined alternative, because of all the challenges and the incompatibility of policies for that. So with that, then the combined alternative was also withdrawn. At this point in time, we also discontinued the federal process, the Federal Environmental Clearance, which is NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. That was discontinued at that point. So currently we're clearing the project through the state process, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. And we'll have Jaime talk a little bit more about the draft environmental document in a few minutes. Next slide. And so here's our current project timeline, which is consistent with Measure M. Currently, as I mentioned, we are here at the environmental clearance stage, where we're looking to have final environmental clearance in 2023, into final design in 2023 through 2028, and construction in 2029. So we're looking, a little further out for construction, because that's when we are allocated the funding from Measure M expenditure plan. And we anticipate service in 2035. But the Eastside Transit Corridor project is a priority project for the board. So they are looking for ways, working with staff, to find ways to build the project sooner and get it into operations, hopefully by 2028. However, again, it requires a board decision, funding, and then also all the technical work needs to be in place as well. Next slide. So the Washington alternative is approximately about 9 miles. It includes 7 stations, one of them being a relocated station, which is at Atlantic and Pomona. And for that station, we introduced in November 2 design options. One is a fully covered underground station, and one is an open underground station. I'll share some slides. I'll share some pictures in terms of what we mean by an open concept station. Atlantic and Whittier will be fully underground, as well as Commerce Citadel will be covered underground. And we then go into an aerial configuration out of the tunnel. And then in the city of Montebello, in particular from Garfield Avenue, we're looking at a design option, which could either be aerial that runs above the street, or either street level, which is at grade. And that would be the case also for the Greenwood station. We would be studying the station either at grade, street level, or aerial. From there, the alternative or the project then continues at grade to the city of Whittier, which then includes Rosemead, Norwalk, and Lambert Station. Next slide. So you heard me say a couple terms in the last, when I was explaining the project, and essentially aerial, as you can see here, it runs above street level, and then at grade, as we refer to at the street level, and subterranean, which is underground. There you have a picture of a station portal at Mariachi Plaza, which is what we would have for all of our underground stations. The picture next to that is the underground but Memorial Park Station, which is again an open air concept that's still underground, but yet a bit easier to reach the platform, and it's visible and you have natural ventilation. So keep these terms in mind as Melissa will present the design. She'll go through the design and share where station locations are and what type of configurations, light rail configurations are planned and what we're evaluating as part of the proposed project. Next slide. So the project has an allocation from Measure M expenditure plan. Essentially, the first funding cycle for the project would be for the Washington alternative, which is roughly about $3 billion. And that's anticipated in 2029. So when we're talking about a lot of the construction activities or in general, as we look at when this project will be moving into that phase, 2029 is when we anticipate those funds and groundbreaking. We still have a lot of work to do before we reach there, as the project right now, again, we're studying it through the environmental impact report to understand those impacts. And then also the board would still need to approve the project to move forward. Next slide. So as part of the environmental process and what we've been talking about for quite some time is the phased approach. Building the project in a phased approach is something that Metro has done with most of the projects. So in this case, what we're studying in the Eastside project is iOS number 1 to Commerce. Again, that's about 3.2 miles. It includes 3 underground stations, the Atlantic relocated station. And this could be serviced by the Commerce maintenance storage facility site that we're currently analyzing. The iOS 2 to Greenwood, that would be about 4.6 miles, reaching the city of Montebello. And this will include the 3 underground stations and aerial configuration, and also the design option at the street level as well. And so currently we're looking at maintenance storage facility site in the city of Montebello that would have roughly a capacity of 120 light rail vehicles, and Commerce would be 100 light rail vehicles. We're still evaluating these as we move forward through the environmental process and also the design work. The iOS to Greenwood could potentially be served either by Commerce MSF or the Montebello MSF. Next slide. So another key milestone that we shared with the board last month, in addition to the initial operating segments, are preliminary cost estimates for the project. And that's exactly what it is. This is preliminary based on 15% design. We still have 85% design to go. So these numbers are subject to change. What you're seeing here are cost estimates in ranges, and they're roughly 6.1 to 6.5 billion for the full project, 4.5 to 5 billion, for the iOS to Commerce, and 5.1 to 5.3 for the iOS Greenwood. Again, we're still looking at the preliminary cost numbers as we continue to design the project, understanding that we have 3 billion in Measure M, 3 billion in Measure M allocated to the project. And so staff's diligently working to see what are the opportunities for this project to apply for federal funding to build the rest of the project. Also, we're looking what other project elements could be funded through the federal process as well. So Once we get closer to the selection of a locally preferred alternative for the project, we would then start to look for federal environmental clearance at that point. Should we have an opportunity to seek federal funds, we would be able to accept those funds for the project. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to Jaime Guzman. He's our environmental consultant, and we'll just briefly talk on key points on the draft environmental impact report.
Thank you, Jenny. As Jenny mentioned, we are now focusing on the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, documentation. We are currently in the process of evaluating all impacts. We have 20 environmental topics that are required to be evaluated under CEQA. These include topics like air quality, noise, traffic that most of you are familiar with. It also includes impacts to any other resources like cultural resources, tribal resources. If there's any natural resources such as biological, hydrology, we look at that as well. The alternatives that we're looking at in the document are the ones that are required by CEQA. So that includes the alternatives that we have mentioned with the IOSs, but as also the no project alternative. What we look at in the document is short-term or construction impacts, and then long-term operational impacts as well. And what we do there is compare the existing conditions with the future with the project, and make determinations, and also provide some mitigations where needed to address the potential impacts of the project. In addition to that, we look at how this project fits in with development that's going on around the area, as these areas are quite built up, but there's still a lot of projects going on in the area. So we look at cumulative effects of the project. One of the things that is very important is to communicate this with the public about what the impacts will be. So we have that, we will be coming out to you again before the release of the document, which right now is scheduled to be in spring, summer 2022. So it'll be very shortly that we'll come back to you to talk to you briefly about the kinds of impacts and mitigation measures that you'll see in the document. You'll then have an opportunity to review the document once it comes out to the, it's published. And we can continue having conversations there with your input on the alternatives that are being evaluated. Jenny?
Great, next slide. So next up, we want to talk about project elements and what are some of the items that you'll see during construction. And this is primarily for the underground segment, which is through the City of Commerce going up to the East LA area. So essentially what we use to tunnel is a tunnel boring machine, which is a giant drill. It digs very slowly to the extent where most people won't even feel or hear the operation of the machine drilling. It drills very slowly. In order to get the tunnel boring machine in the ground for the launching site, which is where we're looking at for the City of Commerce in an industrial area, would require roughly anywhere between 2 to 3 acres. And then we are extracting the tunnel boring machine in the East LA community. Next slide. So another project element that would require property would be the temporary construction staging areas. And essentially these are needed for storage of equipment, materials, construction vehicles, and in some cases, temporary offices for construction staff. The picture that you see here is an example of Little Tokyo right now in downtown LA. And this is for the Regional Connector Project. So wanted to share these items because these are ultimately what Melissa will be going through and identifying what are some of the areas that we're looking at within the station proximity. They need to be close to the station for us to have these construction staging areas. Next slide. So before we move on to the next presenter, which is from our Metro Real Estate team, wanted to reemphasize once again the measure and project timeline for the project. that generally the activities that you'll hear our real estate team discuss either happens when we have full environmental clearance, when the board approves the proposed project, right? Because until then, we don't have a project. And funding becomes available. And our funding currently right now, based on Measure M, would be in 2029. So that's when we would be anticipating construction in 2029 based on the Measure M timeline. So with that, I will turn it over to Constantine, and we'll put it on the next slide for him to present an overview of Metro's property acquisition process and relocation.
All right, good evening. And my name is Constantine Akram, or Constantino in Espanol. So Metro is a public agency, and as a public agency, there are regulations that public agencies must follow. Metro follows the Uniform Act, the Relocation Act, or URA for short. The URA establishes the acquisition and relocation procedures and the eligibility of any benefits or payments. And the intent of the URA is to provide for uniform, fair, and equitable treatment of persons or businesses impacted by a federally funded project. So let's do a real general high-level overview of acquisition and relocation. If we can move to the next slide, please. All right. So there are three major steps. Metro appraises if or when the property is impacted, and any portion of the property is needed for project purpose. There are three steps: appraise, acquire, and relocate. So the first step, appraise. Metro appraises the property. First of all, Metro hires independent and impartial, highly qualified appraisers. Then the appraisers will, of course, appraise all the property interest. If it's a business, Metro will also appraise fixtures and equipment if business is subject to a potential relocation. Fixtures and equipment will be appraised as well. The appraiser will request to physically inspect the property. Appraiser would like to walk the property with the property owner, would like to understand the property, would really appreciate the owner's input. The owners should definitely accompany the appraiser. And the appraiser will also thoroughly study and understand the impact on the property by the project, of what particular impact does to the property, how it might affect the value. And so the appraiser will then determine the fair market value. The second step is, once the fair market value is determined, the appraiser will, Metro will present a purchase offer based on the appraisal, based on that fair market value. And once the offer is presented and escrow is open, well, first of all, we'll work with the owner to reach the agreement. And the owners also have the ability to provide their appraisal. You will be receiving, if you are affected, if your property is impacted by the project, you will be receiving all the information, all the proper notices, you will know what to do, and we will work with you very closely. And so once the agreement is reached, escrow is opened, Metro will also work with the owner to provide any required documents to close the escrow. And the third step, if or when it is an issue, then if it's relocation. So Metro will meet with impacted property owners or occupants to discuss any relocation, to determine eligible benefits, to provide more, moving assistance and coordinate any eligible payments. So this entire process, once the project is approved and the offers are presented to property owners, it may take anywhere from, for relocation, for example, it may take up to 18 or 24 months to reach agreements, to relocate, to open escrow, to close escrow. It really varies on a lot of different individual or unique factors. So it can be complex or simple, or depending on individual circumstances. So there's if or when it comes to that, a lot more information will be provided to the impacted property owners. And I think that's a good summary, and I'll be available for any questions.
Thank you, Jenny and Constantine. Briefly, another thing that happens once we start into construction, the project gets a construction relations team, and it's a group of community relations individuals who will be situated on site where the construction activities are taking place in an office that is an area that you can walk into to get information and to speak to people one-on-one in person about any construction related issues that are going on, any impacts that you foresee, but also to get resources should you be an impacted person that has a business along the alignment. And with that, one of the few things that Metro offers to the businesses is what's called the Business Solution Center, and it's an opportunity that gives businesses hands-on business development. It's for small businesses to give you advice and coaching on how to sustain business during construction, but also beyond that part. There's expert assistance. There are referrals to technical professionals, and also long-term business planning, among other aspects that they offer through the Business Solution Center, which is also an in-person option that is provided at these offices. Additionally, there's what's called the Eat Shop Play program, and pretty much that is a local advertising that brings focus and attention to the project area businesses that are impacted by Metro construction projects. So in this case, the businesses that would be impacted, immediately impacted by the construction of the project, qualify for these advertisements that Metro shares along the alignment. And this is a way to promote your business for free through the Metro channel, and also be spotlighted among other businesses that we spotlight throughout the duration of the construction. There's also what's called Business Interruption Fund. This is something that is on a case-by-case basis for each project. Currently, the Metro Board of Directors hasn't authorized what's called the BIF, for the Business Interruption Fund, for the Eastside Transit Corridor. But again, it's subject to approval, and that doesn't come into play until we are closer to construction. But again, that can be requested, and is something that is being definitely addressed and considered even now for this project. So more to come on the Business Interruption Fund. Another thing that is very important, and that is for folks who are interested either themselves or they know folks in the area that would like to not just see the project happen, but also be a part of it and be more hands-on as far as construction goes. And this is what's called the Project Labor Agreement and Construction Careers Policy that was established to encourage local folks to apply and to be a part of this, but also the requirements for the contractor, once selected, to hire locally for workers that are 40, 20, and 10% percentages of their workforce. So 40% targeted worker is an individual whose primary residence is within an extremely economically disadvantaged area. And again, that's determined, of course, as we get closer to construction, and it is something that the contractor has to provide to let them know that their 40% of the workforce meets those requirements. There's also a 20% apprenticeship program, and it's for an individual enrolled in an apprenticeship training program. They will work with local CBOs. Again, hasn't been defined, but this is an opportunity to place you with a contractor and to learn a trade that will help you not just on this project, but for future use if you would like to get into the construction trade. And there's also the 10% disadvantaged worker, and it's for a targeted worker who faces additional barriers to employment, like a homeless person, someone who's under foster care, has a history with criminal justice system, or also a veteran. Again, we want everybody to have an opportunity to be a part of the construction team, and these are requirements that Metro has for the contractor once we get into construction. With that, I'm going to pause and introduce Melissa De La Peña, who will be sharing her screen to go over the next part. So Melissa, I think it's time for you to share, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Melissa De La Peña from Cordoba. I'm on the Advanced Conceptual Engineering team, and I'm going to walk you through about 3 miles of the alignment that go through Commerce and Montebello, starting on the west side. So these will be about cut into 5 pieces, and each section will have an orientation slide like the one you're looking at now. And then we'll share the design for each of those sections. So this particular slide is in the area that connects from where the Atlantic Whittier station would be, and we're taking a big turn toward where the Commerce station would be. So keep in mind, this is all underground. Here's the LA County Health Department as a reference, but this is where the tunnel is kind of going through that warehousing and wholesaler area. And so similarly, this is the design sheet here, which shows the alignment of the underground guideway. This would be in the board tunnel section below grade and moving us toward the Commerce station. We are crossing existing freight rail all underground. So in essence, the surface is undisturbed through this area. Further east, we are along Smith Way. This is the north boundary of the Citadel property. And here is Smith Way going across. And the design in this area still continuing underground. The station at Commerce Citadel is located near an entrance to the parking for the property. And here, I just want to point out the shaded blue area are those properties that are potential staging areas that Jenny was referring to earlier. These are showing multiple options. You know, in the project, we will only use the property that we need. So right now, this is showing multiple options that could be possible for this construction. And at the station areas, we do use cut and cover for that construction. And then to the east and west is the board tunnel section. You'll see the entrance to this station is proposed at this location, if you can see my cursor, and that would be a similar portal entrance to the Mariachi Plaza that was in Jenny's slides. Moving further east, you can see this covers a nice big area where we swing from Smith Way over towards Garfield on the right. So here's Washington. Oh, sorry about that. And in this particular area, we go from underground to aerial. So you'll see that on the next slide. So this connects from where we showed on the previous design sheet. We're still underground under railroad and utility corridor. This shaded area is not for a station, but this is the proposed launch site for the TBM, the tunnel boring machine. And this will be from where the tunnel boring will take place. And the green that you see here is where we are coming up from the tunnel section. So we start to come back up to grade on the green section, and then the pink is where we start raising up toward aerial. So by the time we're at Gayhart here, we're over the street, and then we continue to the east. There's multiple properties here. We're still studying and determining which kind of partial and temporary construction easements we will need for other parts of the project as well. From here, we move on to Washington. We come in over Garfield, and then the alignment from here for the remainder follows the Washington alignment. So you can see Garfield here on the west, and then Maple is right here on the right. In this section, we have 2 options proposed, which is one that comes to grade right between Yates and Vale, and another that continues in an aerial configuration all the way beyond Maple. So these are close-ups of those same two exhibits, so you can kind of see with a little more detail. So this is the aerial guideway, and then we stay at grade from here, basically to the end of the project in this configuration. And then for the aerial guideway, we're up on an aerial structure. So this is columns basically in the middle of the street, and it will carry the aerial configuration through Maple. Next strip, and this is our final one here, continuing along Washington to the east, all the way to Bluff in Montebello. This area contains the Greenwood station, and you can see the properties that are proposed for potential staging are similar for both scenarios. And the station for the at-grade option is west of Greenwood. And you can see for the aerial option, it's east of Greenwood. And I'll zoom in to those two a little bit. So the at-grade station platform here is in the middle of the street to be accessed from the street and mid-block crossing areas. So there's no need for the stairs that you'll see on the aerial configuration on the next slide. And then essentially, as mentioned, we would just continue through the middle of the street further east. And for the aerial station, the platform is located where you see my cursor. And these arrows here show how you would access this particular station through stairs or elevators on either side of the of Washington Boulevard. And then at 5th Street in this configuration, we're back at grade. So at 5th Street, we're at grade, and then we continue from that point east in the median of the street. That covers my slides. I'll pass it back to Tito.
Yes, thank you, Melissa. And as we start sharing the slide, I did want to acknowledge that we have folks who have been joining us that represent your local elected officials in the area and some elected officials. So I wanted to acknowledge again from the beginning some of the folks that we have online with us. We have from Montebello, Mayor Kimberly and Cobos Carthorne. We also have who else? We have Viviana Gomez from Supervisor Han's office, who's joining us again tonight. Thank you for joining us. We also have Ben Feldman from the office of Supervisor Hilda Solis, who is joining us. And in person at over in Commerce, at the Commerce City Hall parking lot, we have Mayor Leonard. I'm trying to get your name, Mayor. Leonard.
It's Mendoza.
Mendoza. Mr. Mayor Mendoza, please, so you acknowledge that in person, please raise your hand so people can see you as well. But thank you for joining us at the Commerce City Hall. Appreciate you being a part of this. So what I wanted to do is talk briefly about what's coming to the project webpage, which is a new interactive tool online that will be linked from the project webpage shortly when it becomes live. And this is pretty much a story map that provides information about the project, and it's more interactive. You're able to zoom in, get more information on certain aspects of the alignment from East LA to Whittier. You can link it to or see what the existing transit services are in the area, look at destinations along the alignment. Pretty much look at all the things that are involved with this project moving forward, and see get more aspect of how to zoom in and get a lot more information on this project. Aside from what we're presenting tonight, this is a way for you to check what's going on over there, get updated on the project, look at where we are in the process, the next steps, learn more about light rail. It's going to be a great tool, and we encourage you to go online shortly when this is live to be a part of this. And this will be on the project webpage at metro.net/Eastside Phase 2. So with that, we can go on to the next slide and get ready for our questions and comments. This is an opportunity for you to ask your questions. We're going to ask you to raise your hand, and we will call you. We have staff that will go through that will call the people that are online asking their questions, and then we will go ahead and answer your questions.
Sorry, real quick before we actually start the Q&A, just wanted to mention that all this information is going to be available on our project website, including the slides that Melissa shared. So if folks want to take some time to review and also ask questions later down the road, feel free to email the project email, and then we'll be able to answer any questions that are, if you think of something later. Sorry, just wanted to mention that very quickly.
Thank you. And also, if you prefer not to ask your question to us verbally, you also have the opportunity to ask using the Q&A function. And you can type your question and submit it, and staff will read the question and respond in writing to you, so you can see, how what the response is to your question. For those of you that are listening via telephone and you would like to ask your question and be acknowledged that you would have your hand raised, you can raise your hand through the telephone by hitting *9 to raise your hand, and then that'll trigger the hand raise feature, and we will know that you have a question. We'll call you based on your phone number, and then we'll go from there. Once we get to your call, we'll ask you to unmute yourself hitting the *6 button, and then that will unmute you. So those are the options to ask your questions. We are also going to have a timer that is for 1:30 that will also come up on the screen. When the timer hits 0, you will hear a sound of 3 beeps, and that is to let you know that time is up, and we ask you to wrap up your questions at that time. Should you have more questions, again, we'll ask you to lower your hand and then raise your hand again towards the end, and we can come back to you and you can ask additional questions if you have any. So that is what we're going to be doing this evening, to ask your questions. So with that, I believe we have staff who's going to be helping us to take the questions.
Hi, yes, we do have a couple of hands raised right now. We're going to take our first call from Mayor Leonard Mendoza, and then we're going to go to a phone number beginning with 323. Last 3 digits are 915. If you can just be ready to unmute. So Mayor Mendoza, we're going to go ahead and allow you to speak right now. If you can just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. I was interested in the project because one of the stops is going to be right at the Citadel, and being that we're expanding the Citadel, it's going to be one of these projects that's going to bring so many people to our city. And I know Mayor Kimberly Cobos is there from Montebello also. So I just want to say hi to her and thank her for also joining in, because this project will greatly, greatly benefit our communities. I'm really, really enjoying the presentation. And I just want to make sure that all my former colleagues know that we're here representing the city, and we're in full support of Metro's Gold Line extension that will take us from Whittier all the way to the city of Pasadena. Again, this is going to be a joint venture with Metro, with a lot of the cities. I just want to make sure they know we're representing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mayor. I'm now going to move on to the next. Tito, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Next.
Okay, great.
So you said that the next caller is the next person we're taking is the phone number that starts with 323 and the last digit's 915.
Correct.
Okay, caller, if you can unmute yourself, hit the *6 to unmute yourself, then we will be able to hear you.
The person that we're going to call on next is going to be Jesse and then Richie. Just wanted to make that announcement while we wait for our caller to unmute themselves.
Hi, yes, hi. Hi, my name is Arlene Andrade, and I'm a resident from Montebello. I've been a resident for over 50 years. I live on the south side of Montebello, where there's many of us who share grave concerns over a lot of different things. We are very concerned, and I was listening in last night as well, and I understand that there's a lot of business owners that are also very, very concerned about how this is going to affect their business. The traffic flow, as a matter of fact, I just drove a route today, which was lined with the metro, and turning those 3 lanes that we have right now on Washington into one single lane is a very bad idea, extremely bad idea for businesses. And the residents do not like the fact that we are going to not be able to make left turns into our neighborhoods, and that other neighborhoods are going to suffer with more traffic because of it. I know that there are some people who are supporting it. However, I believe that local politicians that are in support of it are only in support of it because the major reason I've heard is because you guys are going to get money. You shouldn't be getting money off the backs of your residents. I'm sorry. You need to come up with better, more creative ways to get your funding and not do it on the backs of the residents that have lived here and chose the neighborhoods they chose to live in because of the aesthetics of the neighborhood. We want our neighborhoods to stay the same. Please reconsider running this monster down Washington. That's not a good idea. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Arlene, for your comment. Currently we're, listening to folks in the community. Just wanted to let Melissa answer of whether, what the lane configuration is going to look like along Washington very quickly. Secondly, what we have currently budgeted for this project is specifically to build the project. We just coordinate with our cities to ensure that the project is well thought out, and we receive comments also from the cities as they are stakeholders. And as we always start to kind of look at the environmental impact report, we also look at neighborhoods and communities. That's also analyzed as part of this. So is aesthetics and everything that, that the project could bring. That's what we always study and analyze through the draft environmental document. So Melissa?
Yes, in the areas where there is the guideway in the center running on the street, the lane configuration will be 2 lanes in each direction. Existing condition in most areas is 3 lanes in each direction. So there will be 2 as part of the proposed project.
Thank you. And again, we always try to minimize the amount of impacts to the communities and just try to bring a transit benefit to the easterly cities in LA County. We'll go on to the next question.
Yes, I had announced that Jesse was going to be allowed to speak next. So Jesse, if you can unmute yourself and provide your question, please.
Thank you. This is Jesse Garcia. Perfect segue from the previous caller. Earlier you mentioned that SR 60 was nixed because of community concern. It seems like you're not hearing the Southside community also. The more I look at the plans, the more I see a train to nowhere. It serves no purpose, to be honest with you. I'm on board from Atlantic to Commerce. That's perfect. It's awesome. Commerce will get everything they need. They have the Citadel. On the south side of Washington, there's nothing. Absolutely nothing here. The only thing you're going to do is cause headaches and a lot of noise. There is no way the RVs or any of the other semis are going to be able to go into their businesses. As is right now, they block both sides of the street when they're trying to go into their business to deliver goods. So I don't know if that's been a concern. My thing also is, I'm not sure, where is MTA on this? Greenwood is right there on the corner. Greenwood Elementary is right there. What kind of problems are you guys going to have right there? I'm glad city officials are on board. I want to remind you, this is an election year. I will be at every meeting when it comes down to your speeches and your soapboxes to get reelected. This is going to be a concern. There's precedents where the city citizens can put together, petition, and vote on it. If we vote no, it's out of the city. So there's precedent, so that might be the only option we have. We will ban here in the south side.
Again, thank you, Jesse, for your
Thank you.
comment. Certainly remember you from the November meetings, and we, have those comments as well. Just wanted to mention that we do look at access along Washington and working with the businesses there. That's all part of the engineering and also the draft environmental impact report where we will look at that. It's really critical that we provide a mobility option to all the cities along that corridor, starting from the city of Whittier, Pico Rivera, which they all have great things to offer in connections with Montebello into Commerce. So, what we're really trying to do is create that regional connection.
And Jenny, I also wanted to mention or add that when construction is over and we have live trains that are going through the corridor, we have what's called a community education program that goes to all the schools that are within proximity of the rail, and educate the students on rail safety so they know what the dangers are. And this is something that continuously happens as long as the school is right next to the train. So pretty much this relationship will be happening, and these presentations will continually be happening with the schools to ensure that the students are all aware of all the dangers of being close to train tracks and how to best cross the alignment in a safe manner, but also be aware of what's going on there.
And certainly stay tuned for the environmental impact report, the draft environmental impact report that also analyzes any impacts to sensitive receptors such as schools, hospitals, residences, and the long list keeps going. But the draft environmental impact report will certainly answer some of those questions for you.
Great. We're now going to take a call from Richie. Richie, if you can please unmute yourself. And next we're going to queue up Mayor Kimberly Cobos Cawthorn. Richie, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm against it also because my daughter rides the one from Union Station to Anaheim, and every other day she calls me and tells me, like almost every other day, and calls me, Dad, somebody just committed suicide on the tracks. You got to come and get me. They want everybody off the train. And then I end up driving to Anaheim and back. And it happens, and it happens frequently. And then I just tell her, you know what, forget the train. I'm just going to drive you back and forth every day. What else can I do? What else can we do? She gets to work late, and then she gets reamed at work. And then she tells them, well, the train, and they don't care. They go, I don't care, find another way to work, And then also, I'd like to say, the people who live around there, when they start breaking ground, you're going to feel it. Your houses are going to feel it. Your sidewalks are going to feel it. Just like in East LA, the cracks in there are going to be everywhere. And they're going to say, well, we didn't do it. But I remember the explosions late at night on the 6th Street Bridge. That's why I moved away from there. And now the train followed me over here to Montebello. Yeah. Oh, you're not going to just lose. They say you're going to have 2 lanes. One lane is going to be a left turning lane only, and the other lane is going to go straight. So you're really going to only have 1 lane. You're not going to have 2 lanes. You're going to have 1 left turning lane and 1 lane that goes straight. And you're going to have a photo enforced on every corner. So if you get stuck in between intersections, and it's going to take your picture. That's like a $600 ticket now. I'm against it. I'm totally against it. I like the way it is now. I would rather have buses. I'd rather have buses. And I don't even like the gentleman before me said, you don't see no people traffic on Washington Boulevard, just semis. And that's it. Everybody else, takes their cars, and the people who head through the 5 freeway and the 605 to get where they got to go, it's gonna be a nightmare. Okay.
Thank you for your comment, Richie.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Melissa mentioned, that in most places we're going to continue to have existing conditions as they are now. But in most cases, we'll have 2 lanes in each direction, and we'll have left turn pockets separately from the 2 lanes in some cases to allow for a left turn movement. Move on to the next question.
Yes, I'm going to queue up Mayor Kimberly Cobos Cawthorn. If you can please unmute your microphone.
Well, first, thank you for putting on this meeting tonight. Mine is besides the traffic concerns, the safety is another one. If there's an annex in Montebello, I know East LA, Commerce, they have an annex right by the sheriff's station that has a lot of homeless. That's going to come to Montebello. And also these designs, these what if designs, that we don't have the underground design here in Montebello, but the West Side does. Why weren't we considered undergrounding our part of it? How come other cities were considered, but not Montebello? And I know, oh, we were fully funded, but then we weren't fully funded. It just seems like, why were we not even considered that? But it's supposed to go all the way to Whittier. Is that even going to be a possibility? And thank you for Mayor Mendoza also being on the call.
Thank you, Mayor, for your comment. Wasn't sure whether you were done, but you know, again, what we look at in terms of the project, and this started way back in 2009 when we looked at the alternative analysis. That's when we look at ways to understand how the configuration of the project would be. And so when we did the analysis, essentially we look at a grade separation policy. And that grade separation policy begins to identify the configuration for the project. We essentially start with at grade. If we see that there are any impacts at grade through that grade separation policy, then that's when we start to look at undergrounding or aerial configuration, right? Keep in mind that we have a baseline aerial configuration in Montebello. So at one point, what we do is, again, we use that grade separation policy across all of our system to determine what that configuration will be. So it was considered in terms of overall the steps that we take to identify configuration. So I hope that answers your question. If not, we can certainly follow up with you and city staff on that as we continue to study the project moving forward.
Thank you. I'm going to read out a few questions that came in through the Q&A, and we'll see if we can answer these live. So I'm going to read out a question from Alfredo. His question is, was a below grade alternative ever considered? Even in peak headway, the time between downtown LA and Montebello seems lengthy in comparison to the I-5.
Yeah, and I believe I just answered that question in terms of, the consideration for at grade, for underground. Yeah, it's part of our grade separation policy. And even as we reinitiated this process, we relooked at that analysis again. And currently there are no impacts for that. So for us to be able to move forward with an at grade or even an aerial configuration through the city of Montebello.
Okay, we have another question from Sylvie. She is asking about pedestrian safety at the Greenwood stop. She says this is a very congested area, and what are we going to do to ensure safety of pedestrians?
Yeah, and again, that's why we're working closely with our engineering team. We also work with the California Public Utilities, CPUC. They also regulate the safety of the train. We also have our own risk management that is always concerned about safety. And then also through our environmental impact report, we look at all those impacts and we outline mitigation measures there should there be any impacts. So again, right now we're in the studying phase, we're in the learning phase. And so when we release the draft environmental document, that's when we'll learn more about the project.
Great. We're going to take a hand now from Emily Rubalcava. Emily, if you can please unmute your mic. Next up, we will cue Toribio Hidalgo and then Xavier Arambula. So Emily, if you can please unmute and make your question, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm actually Emily's dad. She's my computer tech. I noticed east of Maple and Washington, over or under the 605, what are the plans there? And then during construction, what's the proposed environmental effects on the citizens? I have family that grew up when they did the 105 freeway and other metro stations and railways, and it seems like always the low income citizens are always affected in our, I understand you have to, make better transportation and involved with time to connect people across the city. But you guys have to really look at, I mean, what's it gonna do to our kids and the pollution. And my biggest, yeah, that's it seems like it's always the lower income minorities are always affected in these projects. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Israel Rubalcaba.
Thank you for your comment, Israel. If you want to learn about how we're going to continue on what the design looks like for the project, I encourage you to attend, the 2 meetings that we have left. If you don't have time, all of this information is going to be available on our project website, or either, you can request it and we'll be more than happy to send that to you so you can look at what that design will be in terms of crossing the I-605. In general, just want to talk a little bit about, some of our projects that are across the city, not just going through low-income communities, but also serving the West Side. And, what we're really trying to do is have connectivity to the region. We want folks to have a mobility option rather than sitting in traffic. And so as part of this, what we're doing is studying the environmental effects, right? So you mentioned what does it mean in terms of air pollution? What does it mean in terms of just those environmental effects? So we will, again, the project is still in draft form. It's a proposed project. It's still in 15% design. Still have a lot more design to do. And right now we're studying those impacts and looking at, what potential mitigation measures could be in place to minimize if there are any impacts. So we encourage you to stay tuned, stay up to speed with the project, the environmental document, as Jaime mentioned in the presentation. We're anticipating release of that draft document in spring, summer of this year. Next question.
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, we're going to move on to Xavier Arambula. If you can please unmute your mic.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for this opportunity. Can you explain the difference between Segwa and Neba, how they work, and if in the end, both processes will need to be done in the end to make this project happen sooner? Another thing is, does the aerial configuration allow for more traffic lanes compared to the ag-grade option on Washington Boulevard? I also recommend maybe to expand the Citadel station so that it can serve more of a to include maybe bus connections, ride service drop-off and pickup areas, maybe something like bike storage capability. And lastly, the East Los Angeles and surrounding communities need a multimodal transportation system and not just buses and cars, which is why I support this project, which is also very long overdue. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'll have Jaime Guzman talk a little bit about the differences between Segwa and Neba. And then I can answer a few questions after he's done with that about what we're looking at in terms of funding and when we would potentially look at Neba.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the comment. So the two laws are fairly similar in terms of their ultimate goal, which is to protect the environment. And the California Environmental Quality Act came about after the national one. They have a lot of the same requirements in terms of the topics that they evaluate. They have, California has specific thresholds that have been developed over time, and certain agencies have, in fact, made some additional thresholds that or topics that they want to evaluate that are important to those communities. And so what we base off of is the guidebook for the Segwa guidebook to get the thresholds for our analysis and the topics. For NEPA, there is a general, each agency has their own way of doing things. And in this case, we would be working with the Federal Transportation Administration. And as Jenny mentioned, in 2014, a joint document was released that was both met the requirements of CEQA and NEPA. What we have done is taken just the CEQA portion of it and make it into its own document. Should we be going in the future for federal funds, we can then take the NEPA language and the NEPA analysis that was done in the past, update it to the current conditions since it was done a few years back, and then present that to the FTA for their review. There's a couple extra topics that they require that are not required under CEQA, but generally most of the impacts to communities and natural resources and obviously things to traffic and access are the same for both. Jenny?
Yeah, so basically we had a joint document in 2014. In 2020, we pursued the state only. And that's because primarily in Measure M, we had a lot of state funding, primarily state and local funding. And so we're continuing with the CEQA process right now. But at some point, if the project is competitive enough at the national level among several other projects in the nation, then we would look to pursue funding and then look to environmentally clear this project through the NEPA process. But of course, we're looking at ways to do that, whether we're going to environmentally clear the entire project or some project elements. Real quick, I know that one of your other questions was related to number of lanes for both. Perhaps Melissa could quickly answer that question, whether the lane configuration changes for aerial or at grade.
And the condition is the same for both scenarios. So the 2 lanes each direction applies to the entire segment I walked through today.
Yeah. So stays the same, 2 lanes in each direction for both aerial and at grade, and then you have left turn pockets at signalized intersections.
Correct. And the left turn pockets are separate.
And in some cases.
So we've got 2 through lanes. Yeah.
Yeah. And also just to kind of talk a little bit more about what we look at in terms of bikes, definitely multimodal is what we strive for in terms of having that connectivity first last mile. We're going to have first last mile workshops later once we have an understanding of what the local preferred alternative is, the locally preferred alternative. So we'll talk a little bit more of that, and hopefully the commenter that was on right now could be involved in that to be able to comment on first last mile planning. So bike storage is also part of a consideration as we look at our stations as well, multimodal as well, so bus interface. So we'll continue to look at that and analyze that. Next question.
Yes, the next question is from Toribio Hidalgo. Toribio, if you can unmute your microphone and provide your comment or question.
Good evening. Thank you. I've been following this for a couple of years, and my question is pretty specific. For the relocation of the station at Atlantic and Beverly, so there's some property that I'm concerned about, and is it going to impact the property on Beverly and Atlantic near the Shell corner, or are you guys looking to impact the properties around the old Pet Boys? That's my question.
Yes, thank you. But I'm trying to reorient myself, and perhaps Melissa can help me answer this question. But we're certainly not looking at the Pep Boys store. But perhaps Melissa, if you can answer that question.
Yes, I don't have those slides open at the moment, but there are properties both on the east and west of Atlantic at Beverly that, depending on the configuration of the station and alignment, would potentially be part of the staging area. So,
Well, Toribio, let's do this. If you can provide our community relations team and our outreach consultant your information, we can touch base and figure out which property you're talking about specifically, so that we can understand if whether, that is one of the potentially impacted properties.
Great.
mostly the ones on the south side.
Great. Yeah, because the property I'm interested in knowing if it's going to be impacted is right next to the Shell station. So who do I reach out to?
If you can just send your address or your email through the Q&A, we'll be able to see it on our end.
Thank you.
And then we'll respond to you separately. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm now going to queue up M Daddy, and then I'll read a few questions that came in through the Q&A. So M Daddy, if you can please unmute your mic and provide your question. Okay, next in the M Daddy is not unmuting, so I'll just read a question that came in through the chat in the meantime. We have a question from Sylvie asking if the Greenwood corridor could be underground.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. But again, this goes back to the mayor's question for Montebello. Was that considered? And again, as we looked at the alternative analysis, that was an opportunity where we looked at it. We also looked at it again when we did the first environmental document back in 2014. And then we reevaluated, again, the grade separation policy that we apply throughout the entire network to understand the configuration. So we always start at the at grade. If we see that within the grade separation policy that we can continue at grade, the project remains at grade. So we revisit that for this round of environmental clearance as well. So currently we did, and we're right now studying the project both at grade and aerial configuration through the city of Montebello and Greenwood Station.
Okay, thank you. Sylvie, hope that answers your question. We're gonna go back to M Daddy. M Daddy, if you can unmute your microphone. Next in the queue is Lydia Ortega and then Jesse. So Lydia, if you can get ready to unmute your mic. It looks like M Daddy is not responding. Lydia, if you can unmute your microphone. Okay, looks like Lydia's having issues as well. Okay, let's move on to Jesse. Jesse, if you can please unmute your microphone.
Thank you again for taking my question. It's more of a technical engineering type of scenario I have here. So first of all, I'd like to thank Mayor Cobos for joining the call. And I think I have an answer of, and this is just my perception. I mean, I'm not a civil engineer, but I am an engineer nonetheless. So in looking in your plot plans and how this is going about, one reason is we have a natural barrier. Mother Nature put a river right there. It's going to take a lot more money and a lot more work to go underground all the way to Whittier. My question is, how long is that bridge going to be out of commission, and what upgrades are going to be done if this project goes through?
Thank you again for your question, Jesse. In terms of the bridges that are along the corridor, and again, remember, we're looking at a phased approach for the project, right? So we'll know a bit more about that based on funding and our board's direction. But in terms of the bridges for the Rio Hondo and the San Gabriel, currently we would look at phasing the construction to try to minimize the amount of impacts that go through the bridge. But we are looking to basically demo the bridge and then reconstruct a new bridge. As a matter of fact, we're working with the local jurisdictions and Caltrans as we start to look at improvements for those bridges so that it can, one, hold capacity and also accommodate the project. So I hope that answers your question related to the bridges, but that's what's currently planned. And I don't know, Melissa, if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
Nope, you answered that perfectly. Yeah, it would be phased to maintain traffic whenever possible. And so it could be constructed in multiple phases and will be a new bridge after construction.
Next question.
Great. Let's go to Lydia Ortega. Let's try once more. Next, we're going to queue up Arturo Gonzalez and then Richie. So Lydia, if you can unmute your microphone, please. Okay, looks like we're not getting a response. Let's move on to Arturo Gonzalez. Go ahead, Arturo. Yes.
Yes. I was here last night, and I just want to thank you guys again. I think this is a great investment in the community. And I just kind of want to reiterate my comment, and I appreciate your responses. Asking Metro to revisit potentially aligning the train along the BNSF corridor that runs east-west through Commerce and Montebello. I think that would mitigate a lot of the issues with community concerns. We already have an existing grade separated corridor, and I actually live behind it. My kids throw the ball over all the time. There's adequate space that they just leave trains for days at. I think that would, first of all, it would save a lot of money, and there can still be a Citadel stop, which is literally 100 feet away from where you guys are planning it now. And it wouldn't be underground, it'd be at grade. So that would be saving billions of dollars. It would be closer to population centers. You can even have a Montebello stop near, Montebello Boulevard and Whittier Boulevard. And in terms of a lot of the community concerns and what the mayor was voicing, I think a lot of those concerns could be mitigated. So again, I appreciate everything. I just would like Metro to revisit potentially aligning along the BNSF railway corridor. And, Metro's creative, pedestrian bridges, all that kind of stuff can help mitigate some of the issues, but it's a big money saver and it's more community oriented. Thank you.
Thank you, Arturo. I appreciate that. And yes, we heard you from the last meeting, and we appreciate you being here at this meeting since we know that you were interested in the commerce segment. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Richie. Richie, if you can please unmute your microphone and provide your question.
I'd just like to say that there's more pedestrian traffic on Whittier and Beverly Boulevard, and over there by Via Campo where they wanted to put because of Shore High School, where they wanted to put the train to go through. But then I heard through the grapevine that the Quiet Canyon high clientele didn't want it. That's why they moved it over to Washington Boulevard, like over there by the Citadel Washington Boulevard, So that's all I like to say. That's what I heard to the grapevine. Because I know some people that I have family all around the area, they told me, well, we got out of it. Quiet Canyon saved us, but not you guys. That's all. That's all I like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie. And just to clarify, that's not exactly the case. Again, we study our alignments and look at what is engineering and environmentally possible, feasible, or also we look at what is environmentally superior. In the case of the SR60, again, we found engineering and environmental constraints. Secondly, it wasn't quite compatible with our current policies as it relates to transit-oriented communities, first last mile, and also equity. We have an entire report that details exactly why the SR60 did not move forward. And in terms of the aerial configuration that went, along the SR60 and then down Garfield, again, that was something that we wanted to study, wanted to understand what were the connections to Washington Boulevard. And in this case, the Atlantic Underground now captures the Citadel through the City of Commerce, which is an activity center, and also Atlantic and Whittier, where we see high concentration of transit-dependent populations. So really what we're trying to do is design the project to the best of our ability, and also looking at the environmental impacts of that and seeing how we can best serve, again, the communities along the eastern portion of LA County.
Thank you, Jenny. We have a couple questions that came in through the Q&A. I'll just read off. This one is from Zoom user. The question is, can you address the safety concerns a lot of residents have regarding homeless people traveling on Metro and the crime they may bring?
Yeah, so once again, the homeless challenge is more of a broader challenge, LA County-wide challenge. And what we're trying to do is work with several of our agencies to see how we can best come to a solution or how we can best provide services in terms of homelessness. It's to the extent where our, our agency, our CEO has made it a priority. We have now a chief of customer experience that really starts to look at overall the homeless task force that's also been put together. So we're really trying to tackle this from not just one agency, because it's not just a one agency issue, it's a multiple agency issue. And so we're working closely also with our law enforcement and also social services. In terms of overall safety, again, we work with other agencies that also regulate us to understand safety at grade crossings. And also we have an entire section in the environmental impact report that talks about safety as well. So we encourage you to stay tuned for the draft environmental document, as mentioned, released in spring, summer of this year.
Thank you. We have another question from Rob Suarez. The question is, what historically is the impact of home values for homes located on the boulevard?
We haven't necessarily, or maybe our Metro Real Estate could chime in, but I'm not sure if whether they work on that end. I think they're primarily working on, working with us on the corridor. But essentially, from what we know historically, not necessarily a study that's been put together, but we generally tend to see property values increase, primarily because now you have access to an entire, rail network that makes it easy to travel through LA County and not have to sit in congestion. So generally, that's what we see. Again, it's not factual based, but we've seen property values go up.
Great. We're going to now move to a question from Jesse. He's asking, has an impact assessment been done on wildlife that live along the riverbed? Are there any endangered species?
Yeah, again, our draft environmental document is currently analyzing that. Again, this is a proposed project. We're 15% design, and that's what we're analyzing. And it will analyze endangered species, contaminants, all sorts of impacts that we would see to the environment. And that's why, again, draft environmental document, that's where we need the community to provide input.
And Jenny, I'm just going to add that we have done surveys in the area. So we are taking all that information into consideration to make sure that we capture everything, every resource that's there.
Great. Thank you, Jaime.
Great. We have a comment that came in from James Enrique from the city of Montebello. He is just commenting that the city of Pico Rivera has a state grant to replace the bridge over Rio Hondo. I think that had to do with a comment that came in earlier.
Yes, we are aware of that and working with the city of Pico Rivera.
Great. We did get a question. Actually, it's a comment from Angelica Machuca. It's a bit long, but I'll go ahead and read it. Myself, along with everyone I have talked to that lives in the Montebello area, that this will be built is highly against it. There are signs that people have put in their lawns opposing this. We already have our well-developed bus lines. Bus line 10 runs through Washington Boulevard. What is the possibility that this project will be eradicated? What is the possibility that there can be a new alternative route? There will be camera lights installed in every, will there be camera lights installed in every intersection? So I think that was a few questions in there. Jenny, should we get back to this one individually?
Yes, please.
Okay. Angelica, if you can actually just send us a chat with your email, or actually, you know what, we have your email. So we'll go ahead and get back to you separately, okay? We have another question from Xavier Arambula. He's asking, how can we get a copy of the EIR being released later this year?
Yeah, so we're looking into how we're going to best publish the draft environmental document, and we'll have community meetings leading up to the release of the document, so folks will know where to find it, how to comment, and you know, what's the best way to participate. So those meetings are coming up right before the release. So stay tuned, keep an eye on your emails so that you can attend those meetings, and we'll have more detailed information on how we will be providing the draft environmental document for public review.
Great, and we did get a question from Toby. Can you please go back to the slide with the projected timeline? So I just want to reiterate that the presentation will be made available online on the project website, metro.net/Eastside Phase 2, as in the number 2. And we'll have that available probably by the week of March 21st. So I just wanted to make that comment, just since we're going through the other questions right now. So I'm going to go ahead and read the next question. We only have, oh, actually, Tito, I guess I should bring it to you. We have 2 more questions that are in the Q&A. Should I go through them?
Yes, let's go through those.
Okay, great. The next one is from Armando. What percentage of the people in the areas affected will be able to use the train to take them to work, shopping, entertainment? Has a survey been done?
Yeah, so through the environmental document, that's what we study. We try to look to see what ridership will look like for the alignment. And right now, you know, the draft environmental document will highlight specifically where folks are coming from and how they're going to get there, and then also what, you know, ridership will look like, how long it's going to take for the ride for each direction. So we'll have more information once the draft environmental document's released.
Great. And the last question we have is from Cesar Luna. Does Pico Rivera have a state grant to replace both bridges crossing the Rio Hondo and San Gabriel River beds?
Not that I'm aware of currently right now. The one that we would be coordinating with them that we are aware of in terms of grant funding allocated is the Rio Hondo Bridge.
Okay, great. And those are all the questions we have in the Q&A, and we've gone through all the raised hands as well. So Tito, I'll send it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Yvette. If we can go on to the next slide to go over the last couple announcements. But for those of you who are joining us tonight, this is meeting number 2 of 4. Last night we had meeting number 1 in East LA to discuss the East LA community. Tonight we are having the cities of Commerce and Montebello, as you heard. Then we come back next week, which is Wednesday, March 16th from 6 to 7:30. And that's meeting number 3 to talk about the cities of Pico Rivera and Santa Fe Springs. If you would like to go in person and participate through a broadcast that we are doing in person right now, you can go to the Pico Rivera Senior Center at 9200 Mines Avenue in Pico Rivera. I wanted to say that the 4th meeting will be on Thursday, March 17th. Regarding the city of Whittier. In the city of Whittier, our in-person meeting will be at the Whittier Uptown Senior Center at 13225 Walnut Street. Again, that'll be our 4th and last meeting of the series. You can join us either online via Zoom from 6 to 7:30 or in person at the Whittier Uptown Senior Center. I did want to say thanks again to those of you who are in person at the Commerce City Hall parking lot. We appreciate you being there and participating in person. This was a great dialogue that we had with folks, either both online from home or also at the City Hall, Commerce City Hall parking lot. That we appreciate you being here with us. People have been asking where can they get the information. Let's go to the next slide so we can show you. If you would like to get the information on the next slide, on the project, we will upload it in the next coming days to the project webpage, which is metro.net/Eastside Phase 2, the number 2. And if you scroll down to the portion that says documents, it will be under the folder that says previous meetings. And there will be a folder specifically for each meeting that we are having. And you can open up those documents, those folders, and to find the documents that were presented tonight, both the presentation that we have here and also the role maps that we had shown earlier for each segment. Mind you, we have 4 meetings and we have 4 different segments that we're showing. So please note that that is available online. You can also email us, eastsidephases2@metro.net, or call our project hotline and also leave your information so we could add you to the project database. Those are the ways that you can connect with us. We appreciate you joining us tonight. The meeting was until 7:30, but we're a little bit after that. But again, we want to make sure we did address your questions, and we want to thank you all for joining us tonight. So with that, on behalf of the project team, Jenny and everyone else, I want to thank you for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of your night. Thanks again for joining us. Bye-bye, everybody.